Recording in progress.
Welcome into the Inside Carolina On the Beat Live. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. We've got the band together. First, before the band starts, we got to talk about Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. They're sponsors of this podcast. Great friends of Inside Carolina. Get all of the swag you need. It's baseball season. Go over there and get some baseball gear, and then go to Bosch. Watch the Tar Heels rake. They're absolutely raking this year. For those that don't know what I mean, look it up. And boys can hit. Johnny T-Shirt can outfit you to check out the baseball team and anything else you need Carolina gear related. With On the Beat Live comes Greg Barnes, Gregory Hall, and Miss Kirstyn Clark. We have a little bit of basketball to talk about, a little bit of football to talk about. Greg, we'll start with basketball. It seems inconceivable to me, but here we are, that Carolina's had the season that they've had, or rather the record they have, and they are still a legitimate bubble team that could go either way. Fascinating how bad the ACC's has been and how that affects the Tar Heels' NCAA chances.
Yeah, absolutely. The ACC lost 1 out of every 3 non-conference games that it played. 53 non-conference losses. Had some healthy conversation on the board this week about the impact of non-conference play and how that impacts conference play, and it's an interesting conversation because it's one that we've really looked past for years, because for so long the ACC was at the top of the conference list, or right there at the top. And so they won a lot of games in non-conference play, and then they got into ACC play. And even if you would lose to an ACC team, if that was a top 25 team, it really doesn't hurt you. And you could stockpile wins and competitive games on your NCAA tournament resume. And so over the years, a lot of these mid-major conferences have complained and said, look, we get into conference play, we can't elevate our standing. And the word for a long time was, well, tough luck. You're not one of the big boys. Well, this year, the ACC is making that case. Like, wait a minute. We're in ACC play now, and we're not able to help ourselves with some of these in-conference wins. What's going on? And it's like Jay Billis told us a couple weeks ago, I guess before the Duke game. He said, this is the same system in place in 2019 when the ACC had 3 number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament, Virginia, Duke, and North Carolina. Nobody in the ACC footprint was complaining then about this formula. But now when the ACC is really not any good, all of a sudden people are complaining about it. It's funny how that works, but that's kind of where we're at. And so I think North Carolina is in pretty good shape right now. If they win their next 2 games, regardless of what happens in Cameron, and then maybe win a game in Brooklyn, they'll be fine. They'll get into the tournament. They just can't slip up. And yes, you're right, Tommy. They're on the bubble. There's no doubt about it. And just got to close out, win a few more of these games, and they'll be fine.
It's just watching. I was looking at Virginia and Duke last night, I guess, and they show the bracketology on the side, and it's got Duke as a 3 seed. And you're like, God, what word are we living in that Duke's only a 3 seed? And then you see everybody else, and it's like 9s and 10s or whatever it is. It's unbelievable. It's certainly not anything we've ever seen. And I even saw a healthy debate. I think it was the Mountain West. Somebody was, I think that's right, that somebody was arguing. They ended up on my Twitter thread somehow, arguing about the ACC versus those conferences. I mean, like, what kind of bizarro world are we living in? But it is what it is. Kirstyn, looking at Carolina, you see them up close.
I do.
Is this a tournament team that should be on the bubble, or do you think that the only reason they're on the bubble is because the ACC is so bad?
I think a lot of it does have to do with the ACC being so bad, but it's also the inconsistency. It's just the back and forth. Some days you see them and they look like they're playing Carolina basketball, and some days you see them and they look like, they don't really know what they're doing. So I think the other issue is that inconsistency as to why they're on the bubble. And until they can figure that out, that's where they're going to be.
And Gregory, we are what, 28 games in or whatever it is into the season. We're still talking about the same things we talked about in November, December, January, and all of this month. It's just like I said earlier about the tournament. It's the same with the team. It's still impossible to figure them out. They've scrambled together some wins here. The Pittsburgh game is going to hang around forever to be a discussion point. But to Kirstyn's point, it's crazy that we're February 24th, and it's like we just started this last week in November.
What's crazy about that is if they had beaten Pitt, then we wouldn't be talking about the same things. Because then you'd be looking at a team that since the Miami and Wake debacle was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-1, with the only loss being against a much more talented Duke team. So then we're probably not talking about the same things, right? But obviously that Pittsburgh loss is a very large blemish, and one that the committee will look at regardless of what happens. And they'll be like, well, look, and now they might get redemption here because if the ACC season ended today, UNC would be the 4 seed in the tournament and would then play Clemson, or Wake's the 5 would be the 5 seed, and Pitt and Clemson would be the 12 and 13. So Pitt and Clemson would play each other. The winner would play Wake, and then the winner would play UNC on Thursday if that's how things finished up. And I think Sherelle tweeted out that UNC just needs to go 2-1 in these last 3 games to secure that 4 seed spot because of Wake's loss the other day. I think it was last night they lost.
Yep.
So that's a double bye. And what we talked about last week, 2 weeks ago, about what this team needed, and we threw up the chances of this team winning the ACC tournament, and the differences between having the double bye and not having the double bye was changed what we thought the chances of them winning it was. Because what if they get the double bye of the 4 seed, then you have to play Duke in the semifinals, which you'd much rather play Duke then in the finals, right? So, but yeah, to your point about talking about the same things, it's really just because of that Pitt game. Because if not, you're looking at 9-1 in the last 10 with, yes, the 20-point loss to Duke, and it was at 30 at one point, is not great, considering how they looked, but still, it was still a pretty much, like, it's okay to lose against Duke. Duke's a good team. Not like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the same as Pitt, so.
Yeah, I think the Pitt loss is much, much worse than anything Carolina's done. But Greg, to Gregory's point there, and maybe pushing back against it a little bit, Duke's not that good. And the committee doesn't think Duke's that good. Hence the 3 seed type stuff. And then Carolina just got totally, I mean, that was ridiculous. That was embarrassing for the program. I mean, I think we can all agree with that. But to the other point Gregory was making, if they go 4 seed with Wake to 5 and then Pitt and Clemson or whoever it is down there, you got to like Carolina's chances to get to the semifinals of the ACC at that point. But here's my question, Greg. Is a 5 seed and beat a lesser team to get an extra win more important than being the 4th seed and having the double bye tournament purposes? It's
a great question, Tommy. And any win that you can pocket is beneficial. I do think if that ends up being the draw and North Carolina gets, Carolina's the 4th seed and they get either Wake or Clemson with a healthy PJ Hall in that quarterfinal game, that's a tough game regardless. But for North Carolina, you most likely not going to win the ACC regular season. They've got a chance to win the ACC tournament. They won't be the favorites, of course, but if you're talking about wanting to win the ACC tournament, well, this team's only going to do it if they have to win 3 games. And they don't have the legs to do it in 4 games. And that's one of the interesting conversations that's going on, is a lot of people up in arms about the amount of minutes that the starters are having to play. And a lot of people are pushing back and pulling up, the 1982 team. Those guys played a lot. Tempo, of course, is a little bit different era, all those kind of things. What matters, though, is that anybody watching Carolina in these recent games can see that these guys are tired at the end of the game. And the players are even talking about it. Hubert Davis, who told us after the Tennessee game that these are 18, 19-year-old kids fatigue's not even a thing to them. They should be ready to go at a hat's drop. He's even acknowledged that they're a little bit tired. And regardless of what happens with the minutes, that's the topic, is how do you get these guys time to rest, because they're tired. We know they're tired. They're acknowledging that they're tired. And so if Carolina had to win 4 games in a row, I just don't see it happen. And everybody made a big deal about, North Carolina, they played well on Monday night against Louisville. 2 games in 3 days is pretty tough. Well, I think CL Brown asked the question in the post game. He's like, look, this is the NCAA tournament setup. You play 2 games in 3 days. And I think that's valid. So Hubert's doing what he can. He's kind of limited with his options for sure. They've cut back on practice. But for North Carolina to have a chance to win up in Brooklyn, win the whole thing, they got to be the 4 seed. They have to have that double bye. And then, yes, all those games are going to be tough at that point. You're not going to have any easy ones. But if you're wanting to win the title, then win 3 hard-fought games and move on, and we can stop talking about the bubble.
Exactly. Kirstyn, somebody asked if Carolina drops 1 against, this is Michael Hardison in the YouTube chat, if UNC drops 1 against Cuser State, or both, does Carolina get in or have to beat Duke to get in or win the ACC tournament? I think if they lose to either Cuse or State, we're back talking about very troubling things. But what's Carolina need to go these last 3 to secure an NCAA bid? And is it important, like I asked Greg, to maybe have a 5 seed and get an extra win in there? Do you think if they're the 4 seed, they're safe?
Yeah, I agree with Greg in terms of we need to get as many wins as we can right now. And we just because of Cuse and who Syracuse and State are, we just can't afford to lose those games. Especially State. I don't foresee us losing that, but again, with the inconsistency, you just don't know. And then Duke, it's kind of already a given with that one. So I think, Syracuse and State are those 2 where we need to secure those. And then Duke is kind of a toss up, which we kind of know which way that's going to go. But yeah, I think right now getting as many wins as possible is the best bet for UNC.
Gregory, thoughts on 4 versus 5 in the tournament? I don't.
Like in the ACC tournament?
Yeah, I don't.
It's significant.
You think it's significant, but it's only significant if you get to Sunday or whenever the final is these days. I guess the final's Saturday now.
Well, yes and no. To Greg's point about the looking gassed, that was in Monday's game after a tough game on Saturday. And
that was a day gap.
Exactly.
Yeah, they had a gap between that.
So if you have to play on Wednesday, and granted it's either against Pitt or Clemson as of now, but they lost to Pitt. Pitt played very physical, and Clemson took them down to the wire, right? So then you're looking at, you have to play that game, which shouldn't be tough, but it most likely will be based on how those last 2 games happened. Then you have to turn around and play Wake the next day, a team that already waxed you and was obviously played more athletic and tougher than you did. So it's like just starting on Thursday is significantly different. And talking about Syracuse and State there, the Syracuse loss, I guess it's a home loss, so I guess they're pretty comparable because Syracuse is in the 80s in the net and State's in the 130s. But one's a home game, one's a road game. So I guess those would both be Q3 losses.
Bad. Whatever you want to quad it.
Losing those games. To answer Michael's question about having to beat Duke, the answer is yes. You have to do more than what we are talking about, which what we were talking about is you beat Q's, you beat State, you beat Q's, you lose to Duke, you win 1 game, you're in. But if you lose to Q's or State, you got to do more than that, and that includes beating Duke. Because as it's looking, I guess if you lose, you fall to 5. I don't know. It gets confusing. But yes, you have to beat Duke to get in my opinion, if you lose to Q's or State.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I'm not even so sure I would put Carolina in the tournament if they lose to either lose in Raleigh or lose at home to Syracuse. But Greg, seeding purposes wise, is 2-1, lose to Duke, get the 4 seed in the ACC tournament. Is that game there, whether it's against Wake or whatever, how that shakes out in Brooklyn? Where is that for Carolina? I think Carolina gets in if they go 2-1 and get the 4 seed. I think they're in the NCAA tournament. But where does the line get drawn with that ACC tournament game as far as we're in the tournament? Are they in Dayton? Are they a 10 seed, and wherever? How do you think that plays out? And of course, we're just discussing it because these bracketology guys are all over the map too, but it's fun.
Yeah, I think the one variable that we can't really account for is the bracket busting teams that come out of nowhere and win, say the Missouri Valley Conference. Murray State's in, but they get knocked out of the tournament, they're still in. And so you add an extra team, no longer to the bubble, but to the field, because Murray State clearly will get in. And those are the kind of things you have to look out for. Sometimes we see a lot of them, right? You go into that conference championship week and there's 3 or 4 or 5 teams that nobody expected to be in the mix. And now some of these teams that are last 4 in are now first 4 out. And so I think if North Carolina goes 2-1 the rest of the way in regular season, they probably feel pretty good about their chances. But if you're kind of leaving it up to chance, right? Unless you go to Brooklyn and are able to win at least that first game. But if you lose that first game, you're going to kind of be on pins and needles and hoping things fall your way. I think if Carolina can win that first game in the ACC tournament, that really puts them in good shape where Dayton's really not even in play, and they're probably a 10 or 11 seed. And then in terms of how high they can climb, I think that's interesting. If they win the tournament, maybe they can jump up to an 8 line. But I would say typically if they don't win the ACC tournament, maybe a 9 is probably as high as they can go. And then you get into the conversation of, okay, well, if the best we can do is an 8 seed, do we want the 8 or a 9 like they were last year and maybe have to play Baylor in the second round? Wisconsin took care of that concern. Or do you want to be like a 10 seed or even 11 seed? If you're 11 seed, the best team you're going to play is a 3 seed opening weekend. So there's a lot of interesting discussion. Carolina has no role in any of that other than the number of games that they win, but a lot of interesting positions on that.
Someone brought up the pressure on Duke, and I didn't realize Notre Dame was still right behind them. And Notre Dame plays Georgia Tech at Florida State and Pitt. And that Pitt game's to be announced, but I imagine it will be before the UNC Duke game on Saturday. So then I guess Duke owns the tiebreaker over Notre Dame, don't they? Yep,
they beat them. Yep.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter. But if they lose, so even if they lose to Carolina, they would still win the ACC.
Well,
right?
They've got to go to Syracuse on Saturday. And Syracuse is one of those teams, while their record's not great, offensively they're fantastic. Their problem has been defense this year. But when they're hitting, and the Boeheims, how many are there? There's like 4 of them now.
Like 5 generations.
Yeah,
of
right.
them.
I mean, it's crazy. I think Buddy and his son are both playing on this team. But if they're hitting, they can beat anybody, especially up at the Carrier Dome. So that's a game that Duke has to be careful about. But in terms of pressure, I've said this before, Duke has not played well at home. They've won a lot of these games, but
last night's game.
That was at Virginia, though.
Yeah. Let's just go back through some of these. Wake Forest, they won by 2. They lost to Virginia at home. They beat Clemson by 2. State, Syracuse, they handled. Miami, they lost. They beat Georgia Tech by 12, beat Virginia Tech by 11. So a lot of these conference games have been real close for Duke at Cameron. And when you start talking about the amount of pressure on this team, on Coach K's final game in Cameron, I mean, I give Carolina much more of a chance in that game than I think a lot of people do, just because all you have to do is land a couple blows early, and that really rattles that team, and who knows what can happen at that point in time.
Right, and we'll talk about it more next week, obviously, as we preview that game. But there's things to be learned from this past game, like don't put Baycott on Bancaro to start the game. So
right.
Yeah, hopefully those lessons were learned. And you're right. We'll talk about next week on the Beat Live. It'll be full on Duke, Carolina coming up. Missy Jones, I believe, asked a question, and I missed it because it's scrolling up, but Gregory has it. And this is valid. I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to start with Kirstyn. Do you think Carolina loses games because of the minutes played? We've talked about it. Guys are tired, this and that. Do they lose? Have they lost games because they're tired? Kirstyn.
I don't know if you can say that because we've seen situations where they've played these back-to-back games and they've won. And we've seen situations where they've played these back-to-back games and they've lost. And I don't know if you can blame that on fatigue. I mean, yeah, like we said, we've talked about it. They're tired, but I don't know if that's enough to say they've lost games because of minutes played. And I think we've even seen Hubert bring in the bench a little bit more these recent games. So maybe that has something to do with it, like against Louisville. But I'm gonna have to say no. I don't think fatigue is enough to say that's why we've lost certain games because they've shown that they can win games back to back when they're tired.
Yeah, I think if you look at the games that they have lost already, I don't think we blame any of those on fatigue because they've gotten waxed on most of them. But could it rear its head in the ACC tournament? That's where that's where it happens because if we're talking about, and to y'all's point earlier, and just I want people to understand, if they are worn out on Monday after a Saturday game, if you're worn out on a Monday after that gap, then what is going to happen when you're playing the very next day? And the way the ACC tournament works is you could play inside 24 hours. If you're unlucky enough to get, I guess the first couple rounds the way they time it now, but you could theoretically play at 10 o'clock on one night, turn around and have to play at 7 o'clock the next night. And I don't care what anybody says, whether they're 18 or 19 or my age, you're tired if you've done all that. And Greg, that's where that double bye that we've all talked about, that's where the tread on the tires. And that's what we've talked about for years with Duke, is that they are worn out through the regular season. They have a great regular season. They flame out in the tournament. And that's where we're at on the fatigue issue, right, Greg?
Yeah, and Kirstyn's right. I don't think you can attribute fatigue to any of these losses thus far, but it's the accumulation. And you're exactly right, Tommy. We've talked about this for years, and we've seen it. Some of those J.J. Redick teams were great, but because Mike Krzyzewski leaned on his guys so much, and a lot of it was he was determined to win the ACC tournament. He won a lot of them. But by the time they got to the NCAA tournament, they were just gassed. It's not just an end of the game thing. It's how are your legs when you start? And maybe that's what the person asking the question is kind of getting at. Some of these games, we just hadn't seen Carolina come out with enough energy. Is that fatigue? I don't think so. I think that's more kind of an energy and mindset kind of thing. But as we get closer to the end of the season, we get into postseason play, that's certainly going to be something to watch because there are going to be times when North Carolina just struggles because of their fatigue issues to kind of match what their opponent's doing. Coach K always kind of rolled the dice and said, you know what, we can get to the end of the year. We can get to the national championship game before they give out. And sometimes they got beat by better teams. Sometimes they just ran out of gas. North Carolina just under Roy just really kind of never did that. And so this is something unique and new for North Carolina fans. We'll see how it plays out, but certainly having to play 3 games in 3 days in Brooklyn is going to test them. And we'll see if they're up for the challenge.
I don't know. You mentioned like losing in the beginning. I think the one game that you can point to of like, it wasn't fatigue, but more mental fatigue was the Purdue-Tennessee back-to-back. Because they played arguably one of their best games of the season against Purdue, but still lost by 7 and didn't quite even have a chance in the last minute there. And then they turned around and in the first half against Tennessee just looked completely disinterested, and that started the whole effort, energy, toughness mantra. But that was as much mental fatigue as we've seen all season.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree that by far the mental aspect of the game has been this issue this season thus far. But it's not the same when we get to March and
Well, it
to
can't be the same either.
early April. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the mental issue in 3 weeks, then Carolina's season's probably over. If we're talking about the fatigue issue, then they're still going. But yeah, it is just funny to me how it has sort of flipped. And I mentioned it and we talked about it, is how we used to look at Duke and say they're going to flame out because they're gassed, and they did a lot. And here we are discussing the same thing at Carolina. Any other thing basketball related? Go ahead, Gregory.
What's the lowest at-large seed UNC can get? Lowest
12.
is being it's 12.
Yeah,
Okay,
12's
that's
the
what
lowest.
Bracket Matrix has them at right now.
Really? Because they were at 11 for a long time. They're at 12 now.
They're the second 12th seed in 100 brackets
Ugh.
right now.
See, you don't want to be on the 12 line before conference tournament play.
Because if
You-
you're on
you
the
have
12
to
line
win a
before
game.
conference tournament play, you better win a game.
And you also
Right.
can't lose to Duke by a blank ton.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. They
What was
are
it Ross said? We can't say that, never mind.
He just said
Yeah.
capital F ton.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're not doing that on this show. This is a clean FCC clear show. Yeah, I just think, again, I said it to lead the show, it just blows my mind that we're having this discussion. Somebody said something about once upon a time 20 wins was a benchmark, and it was. But they didn't play 40 games a year either.
Last year's
back
team
then.
went 18-11 and was a 9 seed.
Yeah, but they didn't play, 29 games in the regular season.
31 games this year. It's not that much different.
Yeah, but you can go 20-11, and that's a mediocre season for Carolina basketball, and it's still 20 wins. So
That's fair.
they play more games. I'll give Drew Cribbs one shout out.
Yeah, I was going to say I like that question.
Yeah, so interesting question, and this is for all of us, and we'll go around the room. Kirstyn, starting with you. If you could pick one ACC player to put on Carolina right now, who would it be?
One ACC player. I don't never know his name, but who's the guy from Wake Forest that lit us up?
Alondas
Wil-
Williams.
Londas Williams.
Or Jake LaRavia. He lit Carolina up more than Williams did.
Jake
Whichever
LaRavia
good-
was on the team, but he went back home to Minnesota.
Yeah,
That type
Williams
player
is
was-
probably going to be ACC Player of the Year. So that's probably the guess.
Where did
Well,
he
yeah,
play in
whichever
college,
the guy lit
Kirstyn?
us up the most.
Or excuse me, where did he play last year, and who was his teammate, Kirstyn?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oklahoma, Brady Manick.
Brady
oh,
Mannix.
Wow.
Yep. Forbes wanted
I don't know if Kirstyn's
Brady
heard that
Manick
story.
and Saul Williams.
No,
I
he wanted
haven't.
Justin McCoy.
Oh yeah, that's right, and ended up with Williams.
He wanted
Yeah,
McCoy, and then UNC got McCoy, and then he was like, all right, I guess we'll go get Alondas Williams. And
I'm gonna let that man buy me a scratch-off ticket. Greg, who would you pick? You can't pick Williams now. Who would you add to this team off the ACC?
Oh, gracious. AJ Griffin.
you took mine.
Where would he play? And like, who would he play two? Would he play the two guard at Carolina?
Probably. I mean, you could play him at 2 or 3, right?
Yeah, when you
That's-
need
I know
offense.
he's technically a 3 at Duke, but I think he could play either position. He's probably going to be a 2 at the next level, right?
A lineup of Caleb, RJ, AJ, Leaky, Brady when UNC had to go small, that'd be kind of sick.
So who's your guy if you can't pick him?
So I can't pick Griffin or Alondas Williams now?
Nope. And I'm not picking because, quite frankly, I can't remember players anymore. I used to be able to know them all in the ACC.
See, this is tough. I'm trying to think who the best point guard is in the ACC.
Clark at Virginia, maybe?
Kie Clark.
I think this team could use a Kie, a veteran guy that can just – I mean, obviously he can score when he wants to like he did last night, but he can still make passes. Is he the best true point guard in the conference, though?
Charlie Moore? I mean,
Oh, I think I would rather have Charlie Moore than Kie Clark.
the other option is you go with the guy maybe with the best NBA potential. Well,
Paulo.
beyond the Duke guys would be Blake Wesley at Notre Dame. and he's a freshman and all that. But I mean, he's a guy that's splashed, and he'll probably be a first round draft pick if he decides to go pro.
I think
one guy in the nation.
I think Sebron could also be really good on this team from state.
I don't think he does.
I thought about him.
I don't think he adds a ton to
He
this
adds
team.
just a downhill bully ability that this team doesn't have.
But when he's defended and getting his head, he doesn't add. And like he did against Carolina. I'll change the question. One player nationally that you would add to this team. Quick, Gregory, start. And
Do I say
literally.
Greg, do I say
Probably
it?
not.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Probably not.
Jabari Smith.
Oh, the different guy, a teammate.
But either.
Smart move,
I mean,
Gregory.
they're two of the best players in the country.
Who you got, Kirstyn, nationally?
I wanted to say it, but
Well, because
are we not
Say
saying
it.
it?
Say it.
Walker
Come
Kessler
on, Walker
has
Kessler.
127 blocks on the season, and that puts him 73rd all time in the SEC.
How would he?
In
Where
career.
Where would he blend with this team? I mean, would he
Same-
play with Baycott?
Same way he's blending at Auburn. He's not playing unworldly minutes. He's
Does
switching
he
out.
start? Does he start for this Carolina team?
I don't know.
Yeah.
He'd have to,
That's
right?
that's where you get to the weird part of trying to figure out exactly how you mix things up, because then you're back to having two bigs. I think it's Chet Holmgren, and I know Walker Kessler was the guy that could be here, was already here, but Holmgren's the guy that Carolina fought for. And even though he's 7 foot, I mean, Drew Timmy's the big guy for Gonzaga. But Holmgren's 7 foot, 200 pounds, shooting 45% from 3-point range. His effective field goal percentage is 70.7.
Oh.
He's blocking 12% of shots. I mean, he is a beast. But I think he's, even though he's 7 foot tall, I think he's good enough to play the stretch four. And to have that rotation, those two guys, and then Brady Manick, that'd be tough to beat.
If I had to pick a guard, I would want the guy from Kansas. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Ochi Ajabayi, I think, is the best
Abaji, yeah.
pronunciation. If
Yeah.
I had to pick a guard, that's who I would want on Carolina.
Isn't it funny how, and that's another thing that's changed so much, is you used to know the ones all around the country. At least I did. You used to know the names easily, and now we struggle to figure them out.
Kellen Grady and Brady both play on this team?
That's a guy I thought they were going to try to get. I thought
Yeah.
they wanted to
Because
get.
he's shooting 45% from three, and it's like 5th in Division One.
Yeah,
you
but
put
he's-
him. You put him at
he's-
the 3.
You can put him at the 2. Yeah. I mean, he's smaller than Griffin.
Whew. Interesting. Is he really smaller than Griffin? He looks
Yeah.
bigger than Griffin.
Yeah.
It's an interesting deal. We could play this game all night long.
Normally the discussion is like UNC's got the best players in the nation, right? So it's like harder
Right.
to pick.
Yeah. After the season, we should have a transfer portal game.
Little transfer portal draft.
Yeah. I think you can pick whoever you want.
That'd be
Right.
cool.
So we'll do it. Gregory, that's your homework.
I'll schedule it.
Set it up, schedule it, and figure out how to document it. And I think this team, Carolina, could have vastly benefited from having a second banger, a big guy to help Baycott, because they could have figured out how to work. I don't know if it's the big fella from Kentucky or the one from Illinois or those guys, but yeah, I think it's just this team is missing one player from being really, really, really elite.
So here's a question, I know we're on a path here, but since you mentioned that, Armando Baycott is putting up ridiculous numbers rebounding. Given that he fits the Roy Williams mold, working within a 2 traditional big set, is he the beneficiary of the fact that Brady Manick's not really a rebounder, and that Carolina's in this new scheme where they have a stretch four, and Baycott's about the only one rebounding? Is he solely benefiting from that? Therefore, that's why he's been so good, or is that undermining his ability somewhat?
I don't think it undermines his ability, but I think he's absolutely benefited from being the only guy getting rebounds. I mean, he doesn't have to fight his own teammates for rebounds. Whereas if somebody like Day'Ron Sharp was in there, you think Baycott would get 12 a game if Sharp was playing beside him?
No, no way.
Not a chance. Am I wrong, Kirstyn?
Not at all.
Gregory, even if Kessler was in there, I still think Baycott gets a lot of rebounds, but
Well, the best way to see kind of what would happen is to look at Kessler at Auburn, because he's getting like around 7 a game, and that's because Jabari Smith is a 4 that attacks the glass. Brady's a 4 that doesn't attack the glass, and it's allowed Armando. So I think to answer the question, you just look at that. If you have a 4 that attacks the glass, then no, Armando's not getting 12, 13 a game. And that's not a knock on Armando. He's a very good rebounder. But when you're the only one who's really going for defensive boards that are around the rim and not some of these ones that shoot out and is where the guards and stuff get rebounds, then yeah, I don't know if it's – how did you put it, Greg? Is he the sole reason for his numbers or something like that?
the sole beneficiary of the change in system, I think is how we framed it.
I don't know.
I think
Is that a different question?
No, I think has Baycott benefited? Has Baycott's numbers benefited from the change in the way they play? I think absolutely. We said that would happen early in the season as far as getting opportunities not so cramped and all that. Now, so many people in the chat are talking about how he's struggled against guys of like size or bigger. But to Greg's point, I think he's averaging 12 plus rebounds because he works his butt off to get them, but he's not fighting his own teammates for rebounds. And I think that's just a fact. Does that downplay his ability or his improvement? Absolutely not. I think he's definitely a first team all ACC guy. It would be a travesty if he wasn't.
Right.
But he's 100% benefited from Hubert's change. And to your point, Manick's, he's getting back on defense, or he's usually at top of the key one shooting 3.
Yeah, and to offer some perspective, just real quick, Gregory, only one player in the ACC has averaged as many rebounds as Baycott is right now. He's at 12.3 in the last 24 seasons, and that's Notre Dame's John Mooney. 2 years ago, he averaged 12.7.
Which is kind of crazy because I would argue that Mooney was a better rebounder than Baycott, which is but not by 0.4. I'd argue it'd be larger than that.
He was another guy.
I really liked watching Mooney play. I thought he cleanly got rebounds, to put it.
But that's also a very different pace of play too, which I assume plays a role in that.
Sure.
If you look at rebounding percentages,
no.
No, he was the main guy.
Yeah. How many rebounds? Look, Tyler Hansbrough. He never came close to averaging 12, did he?
Nah.
Jamison, who was everywhere, and is probably the most dynamic, athletic, gifted guy that play that position or play down low for Carolina, not named Rasheed Wallace. How many did he ever average? Did he ever average 10? If he did, it was right on the number.
Baycott is 2 double-doubles away from the most in UNC single season history. Yeah.
Only 7 Tar Heels have averaged over double digits in their career. Baycott's at 9.4 for his career. And to answer your question there, Tommy, and this is a little bit of a surprise to me, Jamison averaged 9.9 over his career. So he apparently had at least one season over 10.
Yeah. Man, you go back and watch him play. That dude was everywhere.
Yep.
I was going to say, since we're talking about Baycott, his comments after the Louisville game about there's not a big in the ACC that challenges him. What y'all's thoughts were on that? Is it just confidence, or is it a fact?
It's confidence. I mean, he struggled against Mark Williams.
Right.
And Mark Williams, I did not realize was 7 foot tall with 7'6" wingspan or whatever it is.
7'1", 7'7" wingspan.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And he got a rebound against Virginia that was just a freak move that sort of surprised me the way he played. I think Baycott goes out and he plays a dominant game against Duke, against Williams. Then I'll hear it other than confidence. Baycott's very good, extremely good, but he's got to show it against guys that are as big as him, that he can't bully around and don't bully him back. I mean, Greg, that's legitimate discussion, right? I mean,
Yep. Yeah, I
What
mean,
else
for sure.
go ahead.
I don't think there's any question about that, Tom. I think you're exactly right. That, I mean, the Hughley guy from Pittsburgh pushed him around. He didn't respond well to that. Williams' length bothered him. Yeah, it's kind of the old thing we've talked about before. Is if you're playing against guys that are smaller than you and maybe less gifted than you, then you have the advantage, but you don't always take advantage, right? So the guys that take advantage when they have the advantage, those are guys that tend to be really good players. But sometimes when you don't have the advantage, how do you do? And you would like to think that you win 50-50. And I guess we could have that conversation, but Baycott got in foul trouble against Purdue, and they got two really good bigs. Against Kentucky, I think he got in foul trouble as well, if I remember correctly. So,
Yes.
He's done well against guys that he's better than, and it's been 50-50 or maybe a little bit worse than that when the tables are pretty even.
Yeah, and that's not something that's a shock. I mean, that's how it usually is. When guys are bigger and just as athletic as you, they're probably going to win. That's why you want, especially like in football, you want big athletic guys, not just athletic guys. And Baycott has struggled. Doesn't take away what he's been able to accomplish. Let's take a short break. I'm going to talk about Johnny T-shirt again. Sponsor us. You need to take care of them and get premium orders, 10% off your premium order, and also rate us, review us, and subscribe on all the formats that you get this, whether it's the podcast, the YouTube channel. Gregory, where we are on YouTube subscriptions?
We are 55 subscribers away from 10,000.
From $10,000. We need to figure out a way to reward the 10,000th subscriber. I figured when we did this stuff, we were right in the 5,000s, weren't we, when we first started doing this?
Started doing on the beat.
Yeah.
You want some numbers?
Give us
I
some
looked at
numbers.
them. So our first on the beat was February 1st, 2021. This is episode 44. That doesn't include some of the extra live roundtables that we've done. But since February 1st, we have got, on the YouTube channel, we have gotten 16 million impressions, 1.6 million views, 242,000 hours watched by all of y'all, and we've gained 4,000 subscribers since that first on the beat. So shout out to everyone who watches and whatnot, because it's been pretty cool to see the growth, and we're almost at 10,000 subscribers, and hopefully we get there by the end of the regular season. So I'm putting that on y'all. By March 5th, we should have 10,000 subscribers.
Yep. So bring it, get in here, take advantage of this Johnny T-shirt benefits that you get from being an Inside Carolina premium subscriber, and you subscribe to this YouTube channel and you get that notification that says, hey, they're live. They must be talking about something pretty cool. Take a short break, let the national guys pay the bills on the audio side. We'll be right back on the beat live, talk a little football. All right. We're back on the beat live. Gregory Hall. Oh, you're going to cut me off on my lead in, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. No, do not unsubscribe and then resubscribe to be the 10,000th subscriber, please. Because then we'll just be at like 80. We'll be back down to like 9,800, and I'll be sad.
Yeah. If we go backwards, we're going to research who unsubscribed and come after you and go find you. I'm sure we'll see you at a game sometime. But let's talk football. Mack Brown spoke to the media. What was it, yesterday? Day before yesterday? Tuesday. And I'll start with you, Gregory. Mack was pretty direct in a lot of those comments. And from what I got listening to him, a couple quick takeaways. He didn't have any fun last year. He said that it was a struggle, but it sounded to me like he put a few notices out to maybe some position coaches, maybe even a coordinator, that it better get done this year or there's going to be consequences. What was your overall take on Mack's mood in the preseason? Certainly very different than it was last year.
Oh yeah. His mood was really like he wasn't like. I mean, he even said it. He didn't have fun last year, and his whole thing about coming back to coaching was to have more fun, and not let losses affect him. But just with the expectations of last year and the disappointment, it was very obvious that he's what's the word? Motivationally pissed off, if that's a thing. Like, it's not like he's pissed off and is just like, oh, like I'm got my head down and I'm angry. Like, it's the being angry is motivating some of these changes and whatnot. And Greg's article kind of combined it all together and some of the similarities to the Larry Fedora years, which I was fascinated by. I didn't even consider that. But it's just the mood of him being angry was that he's at least it sounds like, and I don't know if this is me drinking the Kool-Aid, but it sounds like in Mack's eyes, he's kind of figured out what needs to change to be better next year, and is trying to do everything possible to make that happen. And that started with firing or mutually parting ways with Jay Bateman, and bringing in Chizik. And then the second side of it is Mack stepping up and doing more in the offensive side, on the offensive side of the ball in those meeting rooms. And when it comes to calling plays, and not Mack calling plays, but just the process and the preparation of when to call plays and focusing on matchups and things like that. And the directness was very obviously towards the offense because, and he said multiple times, I've been asking for these things and they haven't changed, so now I'm going to fix them. Is what he literally said, that I'm going to fix them, which I thought was interesting. And kind of the biggest takeaway is that Mack being direct and being like, this is what needs to be fixed. I've asked for it to be fixed. It hasn't been fixed. Now it's my turn.
And we're going to get into a discussion. Everybody has a different topic we want to discuss, but Greg, I do want to get your take on that, since you've sort of seen the evolution of Mack 2.0 here. To Gregory's point right there, he flat out said, I have asked for things to be changed and haven't been changed. Now I'm going to get in there and I'm going to fix it, basically fix it myself. He sounded pissed in his preseason press conference, I thought. And if he sounds like that in a press conference where he puts on a great front for the media and for everybody watching, how do you think those meetings in the off season with those coaches and maybe some of the players, how do you think they went in your mind?
I think coming off a 6-7 year when you were preseason top 10 and everybody around the program was fully anticipating a trip to Charlotte for the ACC championship game, I'm sure those were very difficult conversations. And I mean, if you just go back to last spring, I mean, Mack laid out what he expected and where he thought things needed to improve. I mean, he wanted to see more of a traditional running game without having Javonte and Michael Carter. He talked about wanting more pass rushers to emerge. So we kept looking in the fall for, okay, who's going to step up? That led to Gregory's now famous Des Evans prediction. And so there were certain things, and sacks was another one. Sam Howell had 70 sacks his first 2 years. That was the point of contention, and that was something that needed to be corrected. And yet none of those things really took place, even though the quarterback returned, all 5 starting offensive linemen returned, and pretty much the entire defense returned. But yet what Mack Brown laid out in preseason or in spring practice didn't translate. I can only imagine how frustrated he was. For him, number one, to say it didn't happen, but for him to lay it out publicly and then for it not to happen, I'm sure he was ticked off. And I think that's what we saw late in the year, and we saw it, the other day when he was talking to the media about these kind of things. So, I mean, Phil Longo, let's just look at this. North Carolina last year ranked 83rd nationally in red zone touchdown percentage. Phil Longo has been at the Power 5 level 5 years. In 4 of those 5 years, his offenses have ranked near the bottom of the list in terms of red zone touchdown percentage. The 1 year it was pretty high. He had Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. Those guys will make you look pretty good. So as good as his offense has been, and if you look at all the metrics, his offense has been fantastic. When it matters in short yardage situations and in the red zone, there's been some issues. And for as good as his offense has been, that's not something that can continue. So it's got to be fixed. And we're 3 years in now. So there's no doubt that Mack Brown's going to have that fixed. Same with sacks. There's no reason for the quarterback to be getting sacked 40 plus times a game or a season. And so I think these are some things that have to be addressed. If Jay Bateman had returned, I'm sure we'd be hearing a lot of the same stuff about how the defense was not producing, not getting sacks, not getting tackles for loss. You know, obviously you got Gene Chizik in, so that kind of changes the equation because Gene has heard those things and he knows how to address, and he at least has a plan forward. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Phil Longo to be able to produce given the amount of talent that's on this team right now.
Yeah, and I see the comments in the YouTube chat, one of which is pretty funny, but I mean, at this point, it kind of is what it is. You kind of are what you are. And to your point about those red zone numbers every year, I mean, we heard the same stuff when he got here from Ole Miss fans. And so it's clearly a systematic thing that they haven't figured out how to fix, except when he's got complete monsters in the running back position. But let's talk about that. What everybody always gives me a hard time. And Kirstyn, I'm gonna let you lead it since you chose it on our Slack pre-show warm-up. Your biggest thing or your take that you'll be watching for in spring practice.
Yep. A lot of people have been talking about it, the quarterback position and who's going to be QB1 since Sam Howell isn't going to be here anymore. And of course, those top 2 contenders, Jacoby Criswell and Drake May. And a lot of people, I feel like their go-to has been Drake May, but we've seen and we've heard Mack say it, like in practice last season, they both got the same number of reps when those games when they did play when Sam was hurt, both got the same amount of time. And no one really, at least in my opinion, really stood out. So I think Mack said it during the presser on Tuesday that that FAMU game, the first game of the next season, will kind of be a time to again see how both of those quarterbacks handle pressure. But I think the spring season will be a really big time to figure out who's going to be that QB1 out of those 2.
It'll be interesting to see how they do it. With just 2 main guys, and of course there's other guys on the roster, but with the 2 main guys, Gregory, do we expect to see a equal share during spring? I mean, it's tough to equal share the whole entire room, but as far as May and Criswell, it's going to be equal all spring, right? I mean, they're not going to if they separate, we're not going to be talking about Mack Brown having a press conference talking about the separation. Do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it was equal all of last spring and all of this upcoming and all of last season, right? Greg, didn't you say that was what we were hearing, that they were literally taking the same number of snaps at all times?
Like, I think, down to the specific.
Yeah. And I think the only discrepancy was in the South Carolina game where someone came out. I don't remember who it was. Drake came out and played, and it was, or is it Criswell?
I think maybe
Criswell played.
Criswell came out, so
only
he just
because
burned May's red shirt.
Correct.
So that was the only. So Criswell got extra play, and that was the only amount of extra play. And I guess you could look at the Wofford game and be like, well, Criswell had more snaps, but they still played first half, second half, right? And I don't really. It doesn't sound like Mack expects there to be a lot of separation, because he was like, the way he was saying it is they want to still have preseason camp. They're not going to announce a starter until the fall unless there is some unexpected separation type deal. which like I don't. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to view how they're handling this, and I can see Greg smiling, and I think I know what he's thinking.
So, Tommy, I'll tee this one up for you for the young ones listening. I'm just going to throw out some names, and you tell me what comes to mind. Mike Thomas, Jason Stanisic, Oscar Davenport, Chris Keldorf. What am I thinking?
Platoon, and not
Platoon.
the movie. You nailed it on that, and it'd be interesting. You need to go back. Gregory, here's your off-season thing. Go back in there, and to Greg's point, dig into the snaps and number of reps that those guys got
Keldorf
during
and
each
those guys?
season. Keldorf and Davenport together, and it was over a course of 2 years, and then Thomas and Stanisic.
And those guys were over 3 years.
Yeah, I think, and those, who was the head coach? I think you might find some interesting things.
And
Greg,
Mack
do you think it plays out like that?
Are you saying
could.
that there's going to be a 2-quarterback system in the fall?
I'm not. I'm just saying what the past showed.
Mack has done it twice before at North Carolina.
Oh. Show
And
a
he
hand in the
has-
chat if you want to see a 2-quarterback system. I want to see this. There's 101 of you. I want to see 101 opinions on the 2-quarterback system. Go.
If it's as close as some have alluded, then maybe you'll see some of it. There is so many variables in play now that even if these guys aren't close, if you find that you've only got 2 legitimate quarterbacks on roster, and when I say legitimate, I mean guys ready to play. I'm not saying anybody else is not capable. I'm just saying in terms of being ready to play.
In college, on a college level.
Right. If you've only got 2 guys, you may want to do what you can to keep them happy. And that may include making sure both guys see snaps. A lot of people were furious with Larry Fedora back in 2014 because you had the chosen one and Mitch Trubisky, who was the upstart. And then you had Marquise Williams, who was coming along. He wasn't the 2015 Marquise, but he was still pretty good. And that continued really even into the beginning of 2015. And it drove people crazy because Fedora wouldn't commit to a guy. But Fedora had his reasons. And I think for the most part, that played out about as well as could be expected. And so there's just a lot of different things that kind of go into it. I suspect Drake May's probably got the front runner position just a little bit, but there's a lot of spring ball. There's a lot of training camp. And I think if they're pretty close, I don't think Mack's afraid to go that route if he needs to.
Since you brought up Trubisky, I saw this stat today. This is off topic, but you brought up Trubisky, so I thought this stat was interesting. There have been 200 quarterbacks that have started 50-plus games in the NFL since 1950. Only one has never thrown a pick six, and it's Mitchell Trubisky.
Wow.
Good
Mitchell.
gracious. Man, you can find a stat for anything. That's crazy.
I just thought I literally saw that today. I haven't thought about Mitchell Trubisky in a long time, and it's funny. But
so, do you think somebody happens upon that and it's like, "Whoa, that's a crazy stat," or they actually go looking for that?
Why would you go looking for a Mitchell Trubisky stat?
Some of those stats people are crazy, man. I mean,
I guess it's the off season. There's nothing better to do.
Yeah.
But
Kirstyn, you want to see what you stirred up? Look at the YouTube chat.
Someone made the point that whatever it takes to win, and sure, yes, if UNC wins with 2-quarterback system, then great. But I don't know if that's a winning formula.
There are some valid comments, and one of them, Sean Crawley says, you might as well put a line of tape down the middle of the locker room if you have a 2-quarterback system. Well, let me ask you this, purely hypothetical. What about if you have a quarterback that thinks he's better than the starter that never plays? What's that do to the locker room? Portal changes everything. They can just say, peace, I'm out. But to Greg's point, you better have at least 2 that can play, and you better figure out how to keep them happy, because if you don't, I would think that circa 2017, 2018 might be in very clear in some Carolina football fans' minds Gregory, what take is yours? Your spring break practice take right now.
My favorite part of spring is going to be heightened this spring because of the crazy amount of contributors that are either going to be absent, limited, or no contact for the spring. There are going to be a lot of new faces, and I'm very much looking forward to actually seeing. I guess we only get one practice, but I wish we had more. But Tuesday, I am very excited, and it's just shorts, but still, I'm very excited to see these monsters that UNC has brought in recruiting in this crazy recruiting class and actually see them in person for the first time just to get initial impressions and to see what they can do. And like Mack wasn't afraid to mention Travis Shaw and some of these guys that he expects to contribute this spring. Malachi Hamrick was one that he brought up. So like a kind of an underrated guy, I guess, as far as recruitment wise. But just to kind of see how they mold and see their size and whatnot. I'm looking forward to, and not even just the freshmen. Some guys that like a Dontavius Nash, a Dante Balfour, or DeAndre Boykins, guys that when they talked about depth last year that still didn't really play, now they've got some room to actually show what they're made of this spring, and that's what I'm most excited to see, kind of who emerges, and then not only that, but who carries it over into fall camp, which is kind of more serious as far as playing time and depth chart is concerned.
Kirstyn, your thoughts on that aspect of it? What players? Greg, you remember we had an award, a spring practice award. It might have been the Bryn Renner Award. I can't remember. To the person that tore up spring, but didn't do it in the fall. But Renner ended up all right. Anyway, I digress.
K37.
K37.
Right? That was training camp. He was blocking all the kicks.
Oh yeah, that was. But spring, somebody had a monster spring game, and he was just destined. Maybe I'm thinking back to
Brent Renner in the 2010 spring game, the first one ESPN came to.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah, that's
thought
right.
he was going to supplant TJ Yates. Yeah.
Yeah. Kirstyn, who's going to be the people we're talking about when spring practice is over? And I'm calling on you to give me some names before spring practice even starts.
Well, I think first I'll start with, I guess, some of these new guys that we should start looking at. I mean, I think guys like Travis Shaw can make a big impact. Rice, is that the guy from Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah,
Rice.
can make
like
a big impact.
11 guys from Virginia.
Zach Rice.
Yes.
Well, excuse me, that's true.
The pipeline.
But I think someone like, I think someone like Zach Rice can make a big impact. So I think these, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a bunch that I just can't recall their names right now, but I know a lot of those guys, because I mean, they're new here, fresh legs, bring a different mindset. They're ready to make an impact. So I think we'll see a lot from those guys. And then also too, and I know you asked for names, but I just can't think of some off the top of my head. But some of these guys that I guess have been waiting their turn last season that didn't get to really play as much are going to show up and make an impact too. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what these new guys are going to do. I'd have to say that's what I'm most looking forward to, a lot of these freshmen.
Someone asked about Shaw's shoulder. He will be limited at the beginning, but he's still working back. So he will be fine. Like, they're just being cautious with it, is what Mack said.
Greg, a couple other things that sort of stood out talking about names and Virginia guys is Mack mentioned Petaway a lot in the press conference. And you're going to have a running back room, and that includes Hampton, that's still down the road here and not in Chapel Hill. You're going to have a 6 or 7 guy running back room. And he said 3 are going to play in an ideal situation. That puts some pressure on some young men to step up and play. How important is spring practice for these guys that are currently on campus? Petaway, British Brooks, whoever else, Kamara Edmonds, he mentioned him by name. I mean, these guys are going to really have to basically put up or figure out something else to do or sit next fall, right? So spring is huge for those guys, that room specifically.
Yeah, for sure, because they know what British Brooks can do. And they got a really good sampling from him last 2 games of the year. Everybody was happy with how he played. Who they play? Who was the Western? It was the Western Carolina they played.
Wofford.
Wofford. See, okay, I know it was a W team.
Not
Wofford
much
and
difference.
NC State. Brooks look great, and so they kind of know what he can do. He's been around a long time. They know what DJ Jones can do. They've liked DJ for a while now. He's just kind of battled injuries, and so I think those 2 guys, they'll get plenty of snaps because they may be the guy in the fall. But yeah, I mean, Elijah Green, Edmonds. I mean, we didn't hear anything out of him. He came in, I think, was banged up a little bit, and basically started at the scout team. And then, of course, Petaway being a true freshman. So those guys are going to have 15 opportunities to really prove that, hey, you haven't heard my name quite a bit. I haven't really popped, but I'm gonna make sure you know who I am going into the summer. So I think for those guys, it's very important. And if some of those guys, I mean, Petaway is different, but if some of those guys just have a really bad spring, I mean, I'm thinking about Elijah Green. Then that may be a tough conversation in the offseason. But okay, this is where we think you stand. This is kind of where your future is. And he would have to make a decision from that point forward. So it's a very big opportunity for all these guys. Caleb Hood, they had high expectations of him. He was really impressive in training camp last year. Then, of course, got banged up, and they really made sure to preserve his red shirt. So he's another guy that needs to show that, hey, I looked good early last year. I'm the same guy. I can do it again, because there's a lot of playing time available.
Is running back going into preseason camp, is running back the most talented room, especially if you include Hampton? That's not even there. I mean, is that the most talented room on this roster?
I don't think so.
Offense and defense?
Entire room.
No.
What do you think? What's the most talented one then?
Defensive line, right?
Front 7.
Yeah.
I guess if you separate D-line and linebackers, it's still D-line.
So straight D-line. I guess Chiswick plays a straight. There's none of that. What were they calling them? The star and the jack?
Yeah, I was going to bring
Positions?
that up, Greg. Your thoughts on the new positions and also moving Des Evans to a power end.
Yeah. It's a missed opportunity. I mean, yeah, you can go Tar Heel, you can go Ram. You can do a lot of different things. I don't think Jack is the way to go, but Chiswick's
I think
done
of
this
the
a little
old
bit longer
game
than I have.
I think of the game where you bounce the ball and pick up the jacks.
The
That's
hell
the
are you
first thing I
talking
thought of.
Shh, don't.
Really?
My parents played that game when they were.
I'm not much older than
1950s.
you, man. Come on. That is crazy. That's why you get so skilled. That's
Kirstyn
why
or Gregory. Did y'all know what he was talking about?
No. I
You don't know what
do.
jacks
I
are.
do kind of understand it, but I don't actually know how.
I
to play
do,
it.
but yeah, not because I played, because my
Oh.
parents played.
Okay, I was gonna
So.
say, did you ever play when you were a child?
I know.
Jesus. Man, I'm
played-
not only dating myself.
I'm
I'm
trying to think what we
making y'all younger.
Is there anything similar that we would have done?
And the jacks are shaped like stars. So
Yeah,
that's
they're like
exactly what
spikes.
I thought about. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could step on them and all those kind of things. Yeah, I think that the power end is interesting. I mean, I assume that's just a strong side defensive end.
Well, I thought so
Uh,
too, but he said both. He said Ritzy and Evans at power end, which I wouldn't think they'd play the same side of a line.
I would
Why
think.
not?
Why isn't Evans a weak
Different
side?
body types.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Evans is a monster. I know Ritzy's a little bit bigger, but Ritzy's so quick.
Yeah, I guess.
This is. I'm busy reading the comments on
Luke's younger like us, and he goes, "That sounds like a game they played in the trenches in World War One."
Probably was. It was when men
Probably
were
did.
tough. It was when men were tough and they didn't carry around their heads in the phones. No, I better not say that. No offense. It's all fun and games. I don't want people to say I'm being mean. So
Defensive line is
defensive-
most talented.
okay. So where are the biggest? And Kirstyn mentioned guys that didn't really have a lot of opportunity last year. Where are the biggest position battles here? We've got guys that are set, unless they just totally go off the rails in spring. But a guy like Ra Dilworth, I mean, he can He's got to be on the field, right? Is he a
Star.
jack or is he a star? That's
He's
right.
a star.
So where are those position battles? Kirstyn, biggest position battle in the spring, do you think, for this team? Not quarterback.
Okay. Can I ask the question first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before
Anything
so like,
you want.
okay, because I want to make sure because I don't. So what's the wide receiver room looking like right now? Because
According to Mack, they're looking for Josh Downs and 5 other guys to step up.
okay,
That was going to be
have,
that was going to be my choice, Kirstyn.
that's why I asked because I thought about that because other than Downs, I don't know who that next
So who
guy
are
up
they?
is or who these 5 guys will be.
My interest was piqued when Mack said that they are looking at Bryson Nesbitt in a more wide receiver and slot role in addition to tight end. Because I think that's a very good move for him.
The slot role, it would not be a traditional North Carolina Phil Longo slot.
No, it wouldn't be a Josh Downs slot, but just to put him farther out.
It would be more like the Pitts from Florida guy.
Yes.
The way to detach him. So is wide receiver the biggest position battle, not named quarterback,
Center.
in the spring? It's got to be Corey Gaynor, right?
But there's 3 guys. It's a battle between BA, Brian Anderson, Kieran Johnson, and Corey Gaynor.
I don't think it has to be Gaynor.
Exactly. That's why I think I think that's the most important battle because it's one position that you're fighting for, and the other guys will play on the line. Like they're cross training a lot of linemen, but I think that's the most important one to figure out as soon as possible, in my opinion.
Okay, valid, noted. Folks, note the center position. Let's flesh out the wide receiver a little bit. Downs is a given.
Yes.
Antoine Green, is he a given?
Yeah.
I was going to mention him. Yeah.
Okay, so who else?
You got
Nesbitt,
JJ Jones fighting for a spot.
He showed
got-
flashes last year.
But here's the thing with Gregory's comment about Nesbitt. I think it makes perfect sense. What North Carolina lacked last year was a big play outside receiver. And De'Ami Brown wasn't the biggest guy, but if you threw him a 50-50 ball, you felt pretty good about his chances to go up and get it. They thought Bo Corrales could serve that role because he's shown that at times in his career. And, just Bo couldn't stay healthy. And now he's gone. So when you start looking at who are the potential big receivers, there's not a ton of them. I mean, JJ Jones, 6'2", okay. He can maybe be that guy. Tylee Kraft, he's 6'4". Maybe that's the guy that they were hoping would pop. But they've seen what Nesbitt can do, and he's got the speed. And so if you need somebody who's big, I mean, Nesbitt's what, 6'6"?
Yep.
Yeah, 6'6". If you can work him some at outside wide receiver and just throw him some jump balls, if he can prove he can catch it, then that's great. He doesn't have to be a burner necessarily. I mean, you got Downs over the middle, and I think Green or Jones can showcase plenty of speed on the outside. I think it's an interesting play. I mean, Kamari Morales is probably going to be your starter at tight end. So you're not going to put 2 tight ends out there most of the time. So why not use Nesbitt in a unique way?
Yeah, I think you got to get him on the field. And then you've got, is it Andre Green, the freshman that's coming in?
Right.
Don Chapman.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
you
both
got
talented.
to get guys. I think they'll do a better job of spreading it around. But this talk when Longo first came in that we're going to play 8 wide receivers, it's just not possible to play them and get them meaningful reps, not just snaps, but get them, do something other than block. So I think 6 is a mark, but I think you got to have Nesbitt, Green, Downs, of course. JJ Jones shows some flashes, the other Green, and all. I think there's options.
But he won't be
there.
here till training camp. So
Don't
yeah,
forget about Justin Olson.
And,
I was just about to say, does he fall into that at
He's
all?
limited, so at the beginning, he's one of those guys. And Mack mentioned that he's limited, and they're hoping J.J. Jones, Andre Green and Doc Chapman can be immediate contributors.
Well, he a lot of people were down on Olsen early in the season. I think because of the Virginia Tech play, where the guy just ripped him by. But he turned to be pretty dependable late in the season,
Yeah, he's not bad.
And made some plays. I just think they need splash guys that can be difference makers out there. Is he one of those guys? He may be this year. But anyway, what about the defensive back room? Somebody asked, did Tony Grimes digress last year? I think, it's fair to say that the unit did not play as well as it could have at times. But Greg, where does that defensive backfield fit in the hierarchy of who needs the most work, who's the best, most talented?
Yeah, there's certainly some areas for improvement with the defensive backfield, and I think that's one of the reasons that Gene Chizik really wanted to bring in Charlton Warren, because Warren's done a really good job with defensive backfields, and I think that'll be beneficial for Dre Bly to get some assistance with the cornerback room. I do think Storm Duck coming back when he did really proved that he's the best cornerback on this team. Tony's got a lot of talent for sure. He's got all the measurables and all those kind of things. But he needs to get better and needs to get more consistent. And so I suspect that's a good starting point when you've got Grimes and Duck as your starting corners. Storm just needs to stay healthy. Gregory did a good job on his story on Storm today. And then, I think there's a lot of options in play at safety. Jay Bateman really liked the idea of Jacarius Conley playing safety, but because of some of the weaknesses in the defensive secondary, they had to move him up. They needed him to do a lot of different things up closer to the line of scrimmage, which is why they moved him back to nickel before his injury. So it'll be curious to see exactly where he winds up. I assume he will stay at safety. But if you've got him at safety, you got to feel pretty good that you got one of those spots locked down. And then you get into the conversation about how they can utilize the star, who is going to be in the other safety position, all those kinds of things. There's a lot of veteran guys. Don Chapman's played a lot. Cam Kelly's played a lot. Gio Biggers coming off injury. He's played a lot. So there's options there. It's just really going to depend on, who steps up and plays best in this new scheme they're going to be running.
Who
Gregory
replaces Jeremiah Gemmel?
Oh, okay. Power Eccles. Agree? Yes. I mean, Jeremiah Gemmel was the Mike. Power Eccles is going to be the Mike.
Not Cedric Gray?
Yeah, Gray's the one I was kind of thinking.
You think it's Gray?
I do.
I mean,
where does Ra fit?
Star. I don't think he plays the true linebacker position this year.
So is the star the nickel?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
The old
I think you have
Cam Chancellor position at Virginia Tech.
Because I think you have Cedric Gray, you have Power Eccles, and you have Malachi Hamrick, who I do think they'll probably want to use a little bit. I guess it's a true 4-3, so I guess you need 3 linebackers on the field. But then you've got, Noah Taylor will play a lot of outside backer. So will Chris Collins.
Does anybody run a true 4-3 anymore?
No. That's why I don't think you have a guy like Ra at linebacker because of that.
Right. I think the idea is if he's fast enough, you kind of mold him into the Isaiah Simmons role that Clemson utilized, where he could come up and defend the run, but he could also drop back and cover wide receivers if he needed to. I think Ra has that speed. Whether or not he is the player that Simmons was, that's a tall ask, of course, in terms of just kind of IQ and those kind of things. But if you think he can do all those different things, you can play a 4-3 basically and just say, hey, you're going to do everything. And if he's good enough, then that makes the defense that much better.
Yeah. It's interesting, the Gray versus Power Eccles replacing Gimmel's role.
Because they were
Gray
really high
cross-trained.
Yeah.
He cross-trained both positions all year last year.
And was very good. They liked the way he communicated, which is what they loved about Jeremiah. Power necessarily didn't have to be that role. He just needed to play football. So I think it's easier to put Gray in the main communicator role at linebacker, and they'll play together. They'll both be on the field. I believe could potentially both start at linebacker. I just think Gray could be the replacement for Gimmel is my thought process.
It's going to be something to watch. You may be right. I still think Eccles will be the guy in the middle there. And anyway, is there a chance Conley's healthy when the season rolls around, fully healthy, ready to go? I mean,
there's a chance. Yeah.
Because that would be season starts in September.
Yep. August 27th.
It's 9.5 months, 10 months, and ACLs now with recovery are around that time. They're not a year anymore. They're around the 9 month frame if everything goes right, no setbacks.
9 months. So.
It's one of those things you don't need him against FAMU. You might not even need him against App. What's their third game?
Georgia State.
So he might get some minutes against App, some minutes basketball. He might get some snaps against App. He
Georgia
might
State.
get some snaps against Georgia State, and then you got
a bye,
and then he's full go for Notre Dame.
It's just a tough ask for a young man, but we talk to hear from his pops a lot, and he's working his butt off to get back.
Before we get out of here, Tommy, you started doing your outro voice, so I cut you off.
Go ahead.
Greg, Mack sounded very keen on the defense improving significantly. Is it just still in the honeymoon phase with having Chizik coming in and he's excited about the changes, or is it something that can feasibly happen?
Well, look, we had this conversation last year, and there was no reason for North Carolina's defense not to be around the top 50 to 60 range nationally in some of the metrics. And yet it was a borderline top 100 defense, underachieved all season long. And so if Chizik just gets this defense to play to its talent level, it should be a top 50 defense. I mean, this is not 2015 all over again where a lot of people loved the defense that year. A lot of it was smoke and mirrors. I mean, if you go back and look, they did a phenomenal job in the red zone. But other than that, it wasn't a top 50 defense by any stretch. But it got the job done. This is not that. I mean, there is plenty of talent on this defense. There's plenty of talent on last year's defense. So I think just from that perspective, the defense should take a significant step forward. What I'm curious to see, though, is if you go back to 2015, when Gene walked in, he was like, whoa, this is messed up. So we are starting base level. We're doing just bare minimum stuff in year one. And then we're going to add to it the next 2 years. And I finally caught up to him against Clemson and against Baylor because they just didn't have enough in place to be able to counter some of the stuff those teams were doing offensively. So does he take that same approach? Or is there a heightened sense of we've got to win quickly coming at him from Mack? And if so, maybe the guys can handle a little bit more of a challenge between now and that opening game. So that'll be the thing that I'm looking out for is how much does he push the defense to be able to install everything he wants? It's not all going to occur in year one, but does he want to have everything in place for year two, which is when I think this team can make a significant run? That remains to be seen.
There it is. Realistic Tar Heel fans think 2023 from Greg Barnes. That is hilarious. That's another one of the comments that Gregory, you don't understand, and Kirstyn, you haven't heard before, because y'all are, you're talking about, hey, your parents were my age, so I'm offended a little bit, but it is something that Carolina fans have been saying for the last 20 years. And here we are again. On the Beat Live has been fun. We've been going at it hour and a half. It sure flies when you are having fun. Kirstyn Clark, Gregory Hall, Greg Barnes. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, just sitting around watching these folks do their wonderful work for Inside Carolina. And, of course, Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Sponsors, rate us, review us, subscribe. YouTube channel needs to be at 10,000 when we get back together a week from tonight. Get it done, people. We'll be out. We'll talk soon.